Hello, my name's Kylene, and on Christmas Eve, my mother didn't ask. I was ordered to cook for 25 VIP guests, with less than a day's notice. No seat at the table, no greeting card, no thank you. Just one more year of being called the Maid, while my sister posed in dresses I paid for, and my name, was quietly removed from every photo, every introduction, every memory that might have proved I belonged. But when the CEO they all wanted to impress turned to me and said, "You're the boss, right?" Everything changed. How did I go from peeling potatoes in silence to watching my mother's reputation fall apart in front of the entire room? You'll see. My phone rang before the sun even finished rising over Manhattan. The shrill tone sliced through the quiet of my apartment like it had something urgent to say, but I already knew what it was. I didn't need to check the caller ID. I knew that voice like I knew the sound of my own breathing. My mother never called to ask how I was doing. She called to give instructions. "Kylene," she said, skipping any form of hello. "You'll need to be in New Canaan by noon tomorrow." I sat up, rubbing my eyes, still wrapped in my comforter. "What's going on?" "We're hosting a dinner on Christmas Eve," she said matter-of-factly. 25 guests. All important people. 7 courses. Appetizers, mains, sides. You'll handle the full spread. There was no pause for agreement, no request, just a tone that expected obedience, the same one she used when I was 15 and forgot to vacuum the hallway before her book club came over. "I have plans," I said softly but firmly. "I already booked my flight." "You're not as busy as Bryn," she cut in sharply. "She's bringing executives. These are real guests, Kylene. People who matter. Don't embarrass us." The line went dead before I could respond. Not even a goodbye. I stared at my phone for a long moment. I didn't even realize my hand had tightened around it until I heard the faint creak of the case. I let out a breath, slow and controlled, the kind I'd taught myself over the years. Breathe, swallow it, move on. It was always like this. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every major event, I was the one expected to help. While my sister Bryn sipped champagne and made conversation in curated designer dresses, I was the one slicing onions in the kitchen, making sure the roast didn't dry out. I remember once, when I was 19, missing my friend's engagement party because Mom said, "You're the only one who knows how to set the table just right." Back then, I believed it meant something, that my role mattered, but as the years wore on, that illusion started to peel like old wallpaper. Still, I packed my overnight bag. I arrived in New Canaan just past 11 the next morning. The estate hadn't changed. Tall white columns, perfectly trimmed hedges, wreaths on every window like it came out of a magazine. Picture perfect. Until you walked inside. Bryn was already there, lounging in the den with a glass of wine in hand, legs tucked beneath her like she'd never known a day of discomfort. When she saw me, she barely looked up from her phone. "Hey," she said flatly. "Mom said you'd come early." I placed my bag by the door and looked toward the kitchen. There it was, an apron laid out, crisp and black, folded over the edge of the marble island. Beside it, a printed guest list. I scanned it quickly, a force of habit from years of event planning. 25 names, executives from real estate firms, law partners, an ambassador's wife. But not mine. I wasn't listed, not as staff, not as family, not at all. I didn't say anything. Instead, I walked into the hallway, hung my coat, and returned to the kitchen. I unfolded the apron, then paused. The fabric was thicker than I remembered, custom made, likely monogrammed. I turned it over and saw the initials, VH. Of course, Vera Harlow. My mother walked in just then, heels clicking across the tile like punctuation. "There you are," she said briskly. "Change quickly. I want the butternut squash soup started before noon. Use the immersion blender, not the food processor this time. Texture matters." I raised an eyebrow. "Am I being paid for this?" She didn't even blink. "You're family. And family doesn't get a seat?" Her eyes narrowed just slightly, like I'd asked something wildly inappropriate. "Don't make this difficult," she said. "This is what you're good at." Then she turned and walked away. I changed into the uniform because I knew better than to fight her head on. Not now, not in her arena. By late afternoon, the kitchen smelled like a luxury resort. Saffron, rosemary, black garlic. My knife moved with practiced ease as I julienned carrots. The playlist overhead, Mom's Choice, floated soft jazz through the rooms. Around 5, a family friend walked in through the service entrance. "Oh, is this your new maid?" she asked, laughing. Vera stood behind her, one hand resting on the counter. "She's just helping out," she said, smiling tightly. "She always does." I didn't even flinch. I just kept slicing. I'd learned over the years that it was easier to let them believe their own stories. Correcting them required too much energy. And in this house, facts were always optional. Image, however, was law. Dinner prep went on for hours. I moved between the oven and the stovetop like a machine, and as the sun dipped low behind the hedges and the lights in the grand chandelier flickered on, I could hear the laughter from upstairs. Bryn's voice floated down, something about the city, some campaign launch. My phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it. A story notification. Bryn had posted, a selfie with guests behind her, cocktails in hand. The caption, "Family Christmas Vibes." I wasn't in the frame. I never was. It wasn't just that I wasn't invited to sit at the table. I wasn't even counted as being in the house. The bandage on my index finger had come loose. I rewrapped it with tape from the drawer and looked at the time. 8:17 p.m. Still 2 hours to go. The duck was resting. The risotto needed another stir. The salad had to be dressed last minute. I leaned against the counter, my palms pressing into the cool granite. My legs ached. My hands were rough, raw from heat and citrus, and too many hours holding a blade. I looked around, at the spotless kitchen, the perfect plating, the empty glass of water beside me, and I whispered, barely above breath, "One more year, and then I walk." But then my eyes fell on something I hadn't noticed before. The printed guest list, clipped to the cabinet. Name number 17, Victoria Chen, CEO, Novara Resorts. My heart stilled. I stared at it, my mind connecting dots faster than I could breathe. I'd been chasing her signature for 8 months. Her team had finally agreed to a meeting, after the holidays. And now she was here. In this house, a guest in this mess of a charade. The irony punched me square in the chest. My mother had no idea who I was feeding tonight. The name still pulsed in my head. Victoria Chen. I'd spent the last year working through 5 layers of assistance just to get a soft yes from her company's procurement officer. My assistant in Manhattan had triple-flagged the upcoming Jan 4th proposal deadline. We weren't guaranteed the deal, but we were close. Close enough that I didn't dare miss a call from her office, let alone an in-person opportunity. And now she was on a guest list. Here. At this house. At this dinner. I didn't say anything to anyone, not my mother, not Bryn, not even my father, who barely glanced at me as I passed through the foyer. I just walked with that name branded into the front of my mind. It was around 3 p.m. when I walked into the dining room to grab the napkin rings my mother insisted on using for formal parties. They were sterling silver, hand-engraved with the family crest, of course. The seating chart was taped to the china cabinet, cream cardstock, gold calligraphy, neatly aligned into 2 columns. I scanned for my name. It wasn't there. Not at the main table, not at the overflow side table, not even a hint of a seat reserved in case. I checked again. Maybe I missed it. Nope. The names of every guest were there, including the one that made my hands tremble just slightly. Victoria Chen. She was seated right next to Bryn. Of course. My mother walked in as I stood there, still staring at the chart. She carried a tray of candlesticks like she was preparing a presidential dinner. "I'm not on the chart," I said without turning. "Oh, sweetie." Her voice dripped with a kind of condescension that didn't even bother masking itself anymore. "You always help. I figured you'd be more comfortable in the kitchen anyway." "Comfortable?" I repeated quietly, as if trying the word on for size. She didn't respond, just moved past me and began placing the candlesticks. I watched her in silence for a moment before turning and walking out, napkin rings forgotten. By 4:30, Bryn was already dressed in a deep emerald gown with a thigh slit too high for a conservative Connecticut crowd, but just edgy enough to pass as fashion forward. She posed on the stairs as one of her influencer friends took photos. Mom clapped her hands softly. "Doesn't she look stunning?" "She always does," someone said. I stood behind them, unnoticed. Later, while carrying in a tray of charcuterie, I overheard Vera speaking to a cluster of guests near the living room fireplace. "Oh, Bryn's been so busy," she gushed. "She's leading a new PR campaign for an energy drink company based out of Austin. They're expanding globally." The guests cooed. One of them asked, "And your other daughter?" I paused just outside the room, pretending to adjust the tray. "Oh, Kayleen," she said, waving a hand as if brushing away a stray hair. "She's between things. She's helping in the kitchen tonight." The phrase hit me harder than it should have. Between things. As if I'd wandered off from life and hadn't found my way back yet. As if the 32 employees I managed didn't exist. As if my name wasn't currently on a short list for one of the biggest luxury resort contracts on the eastern seaboard. I backed away quietly, carrying the tray toward the formal dining area. The seating chart still mocked me from the cabinet. In the hour before dinner, my mother gave a quick tour to early guests, those she wanted to impress most. I followed behind with a platter of hors d'oeuvres, not because I was asked, but because there was no one else and I knew better than to let her lose face in front of lawyers and politicians. "This is the foyer." "We had the chandelier imported from Italy," Vera said, as if it were the first time she'd told that story. "And this is our family room, where we love to gather around the fireplace during the holidays." Someone turned and asked about the kitchen. Vera waved toward me without turning. "She's our little helper. She always plays Maid for Christmas." The words froze the space between us. I turned to face her, but she was already walking ahead, chattering about antique doorknobs. I forced a polite smile to the guests who were now looking at me with something between confusion and pity. I gave a small nod, turned back toward the kitchen, and kept walking. The back of the house had grown warmer. The oven radiated heat, and the stovetop was filled with covered dishes waiting to be plated. I chopped, stirred, and adjusted seasoning without missing a beat, like the machine they had trained me to be. But inside, I wasn't numb. I wasn't hurt either. I was angry. Not the flaring, scream-into-your-pillow kind. No, this was something deeper, older, steadier, like embers that had been sitting under ashes for years, just waiting for the right gust of wind. I thought of my office in Manhattan, my assistant Lily, who'd been texting updates all week, my head chef, Renata, who ran our operations in Miami, the contracts sitting in my inbox, waiting for my signature. And here I was, stirring risotto for people who didn't even know my last name. Later, around 6 p.m., I slipped out to the hallway bathroom to wash my hands. On my way back, I passed the wall of framed portraits that lined the main hallway. Graduation photos, wedding shots, charity event galas. One caught my eye, Bryn, standing next to a ribbon at a charity gala in Manhattan last spring, smiling like a pageant queen. The caption engraved on the frame read, "Bryn Harlow, Community Outreach." I remembered that event, because I catered it. My company had handled everything, venue logistics, floral design, plated dinner for 200 guests. I had stayed behind the scenes. As usual. I looked closer at the frame. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere. Neither was my company's. I moved on to the next portrait. It was of my parents at a New Year's ball, clinking glasses with local officials. I wasn't in that one either, not even in the background. I reached the end of the hallway and saw a mirror, ornate, heavy, gold-rimmed like everything else in this house. I stood there for a long second, catching my own reflection. And then I said it out loud, under my breath, but with conviction. This is the last time I let them name me. I didn't wait for permission. After writing my correction in the guest book, I closed it gently, pressed my fingers against the leather cover for a second longer than necessary, then slid it back into its little cradle next to the wine fridge. I wasn't angry, at least not in the way people usually define it. There wasn't heat in my chest or a desire to yell. No, what I felt was more like weight, a heavy, silent press against my ribs that had grown more familiar over the years, a kind of grief, really. The kind that settles in once you've realized people don't misjudge you. They deliberately erase you. The scent of roasted duck lingered in the air. I checked the timer on the oven, 20 minutes left, enough time to make another round through the house with hors d'oeuvres. Not because I wanted to, but because nobody else knew how to serve canapes with timing that didn't feel intrusive. As I stepped back into the main living area, I spotted Bryn by the staircase. She was holding court, as usual, surrounded by a cluster of people I vaguely recognized from old charity events. Her voice carried just enough to draw attention without seeming forced. Her posture was immaculate, her laugh carefully timed. And that dress, that damn dress, a deep sapphire blue that looked like it had been made for her and probably was. Draped perfectly across her hips, plunging in the back, but not so much that it violated any unspoken country club modesty rules. A guest, one of the Ambrose wives, I think, gestured toward her. "Vera," she said, "your taste is impeccable. That dress is stunning. Paris?" Vera didn't hesitate. "Oh yes," she smiled. "From my last trip. Window shopping turned into a little splurge." I froze mid-step. That dress. I bought it, last month, online, from a boutique Bryn once mentioned in passing, saying it was too expensive to justify. I'd sent it as a surprise. A silent offering, hoping to mend a crack that had existed between us since childhood. The kind of gesture people do when words fail and history feels too tangled to touch directly. But of course, in this house, even gifts could be stolen without lifting a finger. I didn't interrupt. I just watched as Bryn twirled, modestly modest, thanking people for their compliments. She didn't correct Vera, didn't even blink, just smiled as if the narrative suited her fine. Back in the kitchen, I stood over the soup and stirred mechanically, the ladle moving without thought. The overhead lights reflected off the stainless steel, giving the room a sterile glow. One of the assistants, Sarah, a culinary school intern, peeked in. "Everything okay?" she asked gently, handing me the platter of crostini I'd asked for earlier. I nodded, then changed my mind. "Actually," I said, "you mind giving those a quick toast under the broiler? Just a minute? Adds a little edge." She smiled. "Got it." As she turned, I caught her glance lingering on my hands, my clenched jaw maybe. The question was there, but she didn't ask. The worst part wasn't the dress, it was the list of things before it. The birthday cake I made at 16, a 3-layer lemon curd with cream cheese frosting, presented as Bryn's creation when the neighbors came by. The business idea I'd shared during a family dinner turned into Vera's pitch for a charity initiative. The playlist I spent hours curating for a gala event, rebranded as Bryn's Mix when a guest complimented the vibe. It was always like this. Quiet theft. By the time the first guests were seated in the formal dining room, Vera had taken her place at the head of the table like a hostess from a Martha Stewart spread. The menu was printed on thick parchment tucked inside monogrammed envelopes. I hadn't even seen them until that evening. She cleared her throat as the first round of wine was poured. "We're so grateful you could all join us tonight," she began, raising her glass with that effortless air of command. "It's been a labor of love planning this evening." I wanted something festive yet elegant. I froze in the butler's pantry. She was about to do it. And so tonight, we're serving a truffle risotto, citrus duck confit, roasted root vegetables with rosemary oil, and a fig and brie tartlet to start. She read it, word for word. From the email I sent her 2 weeks ago, after she asked, no, ordered, me to just throw together something classy. The only difference was the pronouns. I wanted, I designed, I selected. Every course, every garnish, every decision, suddenly hers. Sarah stood beside me, holding the second course tray. "Do you want me to say something?" she asked, barely above a whisper. I shook my head slowly. "She's been rehearsing that speech since November." Sarah's mouth twitched, like she wasn't sure whether to laugh or apologize. I stepped out, placed the first course on the table with the rest of the staff, then quietly retreated before anyone could catch my expression. The sound of crystal clinking filled the dining room. Compliments floated in. One guest shouted, "Vera, this duck is to die for!" She smiled graciously, didn't even glance toward the kitchen. I leaned against the counter, bracing myself. I could march in there, hold up the plating diagrams, show the supplier invoices with my company's name on them. I could pull out the branded serving tongs my chef had designed. Subtle, but unique. But I didn't. Not yet. It wasn't the time. The story she'd crafted was still too fresh, too easily believed. It would turn into drama, and that's not what I wanted. I wasn't going to fight for credit in a house that already decided who got remembered and who didn't. Let her serve the fantasy. I'd serve the truth when it mattered. Later that evening, after the main course had been cleared and the dessert carts wheeled out, I found a moment alone. Guests were milling about in the sitting room. Bryn was laughing at something a man in a camel blazer said, and Vera was deep in conversation near the grand piano. I stepped into the pantry to grab another bottle of wine and noticed something on the counter. An open guest book, a soft, leather-bound thing Vera used for events like this. She liked flipping through it later, highlighting who came, what they said, who mattered. I flipped to the last signed page. At the bottom, written in Vera's handwriting, tonight's menu curated by Vera Harlow, inspired by European cuisine. I stared at it. And then, without hesitation, I turned the page and wrote, correction, menu by Kayleen Vexley, inspired by 15 years of silence. I didn't rush as I climbed the stairs back from the wine cellar. I took my time, one hand still wrapped around the stem of the Bordeaux bottle I didn't really need, the other holding onto the banister like I was steadying more than just my balance. The murmur of conversation grew louder with every step. Silverware clinked against china, laughter floated from the patio, and the fireplace in the great room crackled like background music in a holiday commercial. I walked slowly past the guest book, resisting the urge to glance down and confirm what I already knew. My note was gone. I didn't need to look to know what had replaced it. That was always the pattern. Quiet truth, overwritten by louder fiction. By the time I returned to the main floor, guests had begun trickling into the formal dining room. Jackets came off, lipstick was blotted discreetly, and seating arrangements were confirmed by a white-gloved staffer who held the printed chart like it was a map to some unspoken hierarchy. I stepped into the shadow just outside the archway, wiping my hands with a linen towel I had tucked into my pocket earlier. My black catering apron, now dusted with traces of flour and lemon zest, made me look like I belonged behind a stove, not near a conversation. A man in a sharp navy suit leaned toward Vera as she glided past him with a fresh glass of Chardonnay. I have to ask, he said, motioning toward the table set with herbed duck confit and pomegranate glaze. Which catering service did you use? This looks Michelin level. I didn't even flinch. I'd already prepared myself. Vera smiled like she'd been waiting for the question. Oh, just an old family helper, she said airily. She always comes through when we need her. No name, no acknowledgement, no pause to even look toward me. I stood less than 10 feet away. The man nodded, impressed. You're lucky. Most family friends bring pies, not risotto flights. She laughed softly, placing a hand on his sleeve in that casual, practiced way. Well, we do things a little differently around here. I bit down on the inside of my cheek, hard enough to leave a mark. A second later, I felt eyes on me. Dean was standing across the room, near the fireplace, his hands folded in front of him like he wasn't sure what to do with them. Our eyes met. He didn't smile. He didn't say anything, just looked, like he knew, like he always had. And then, like always, he looked away. I didn't follow. I didn't move. I just inhaled through my nose, counted to 5, and exhaled through clenched teeth. This moment was not the climax. It was just another receipt. I had hundreds, thousands. Tiny moments collected over years, each one a quiet confirmation that I was not seen, not really. Not as a daughter, not as a professional, not even as a person who could belong in her own family's narrative. Back in the kitchen, I tossed the towel onto the counter and opened the warming drawer, checking the temperature on the bread basket. The rosemary knots were ready to go. Sarah, the young assistant from culinary school, looked up from the dessert tray she was prepping. You good? She asked. I'm fine, I said automatically. She nodded, but didn't look convinced. Out in the dining room, I could hear Bryn's voice again. Smooth, polished, confident in a way that only came from decades of being applauded for simply existing. You know, she was saying to the man in the navy suit, If your company's looking to build a more lifestyle-driven identity, I've done a lot with beverage branding, PR strategy, cross-platform integration, all that. He sounded impressed. You're clearly polished. I couldn't help but glance through the archway. Bryn smiled, her wine glass tilted just right in her hand. Her shoulders were square, posture perfect. My duck confit was steaming behind her, the sauce shimmering under candlelight like a magazine spread. That's the thing about this house. Everything gleamed, even lies. I returned to the guest book table an hour later, when the dining room had thinned out and most guests were wandering between the piano and the dessert station. I didn't expect the note to still be there, but part of me hoped. It was gone. In its place, tucked neatly between the pages, was a thick ivory business card. Vera's. Her name embossed in gold. No title, no contact info. Just the image. Branding. Image. Control. I slipped the card into my pocket. I wasn't angry anymore. I was strategic. I walked quietly down the hallway, past the framed photos again. Bryn cutting ribbons, Vera at charity auctions, Dean shaking hands with retired senators. My face wasn't in any of them. I made my way to the wine cellar, far enough from the music and conversation that it felt like a different house. I closed the door gently behind me and locked it. For a moment, I just stood there, surrounded by aged Cabernets and vintage Pinot Noir, letting the quiet press in around me like a second skin. Then I opened my laptop. The guest list was already pulled up. There it was. Line 17. Victoria Chen. She hadn't arrived yet, but she would. And when she did, I wouldn't be slicing oranges behind a curtain. I wouldn't be carrying trays. I wouldn't be invisible. I clicked over to my work dashboard. My assistant had updated the meeting agenda for January 2nd, our scheduled in-person pitch with Novara Resorts. I revised the title of the internal presentation from Winter 2024 Proposal, Novara East Coast Rollout, to The Quiet Hand That Built the Brand. I stared at it for a moment, then I shut the laptop. When I emerged from the cellar, the house was in full swing. Dessert was being passed, the fireplace was roaring, and someone was playing soft jazz near the baby grand in the living room. I walked through the dining room unnoticed, like I always had, but this time I wasn't shrinking. The table was set, the plates were emptying, the lies had been served with full silver, and I was calm, like the sky right before a hurricane. The room hadn't changed, but I had. After leaving the cellar, I didn't return to the kitchen. I stepped into the main hall just as another round of guests arrived, shaking off the cold and folding scarves into coat sleeves. There was energy in the air now, more chatter, louder laughter, a little edge in everyone's voice that said the wine was starting to work. I made my way toward the far end of the dining room, staying close to the shadows near the hallway. I wasn't hiding, I just wanted the full view. I needed to see the room, not as their daughter or their helper, but as someone who finally understood her position. Not invisible, but deliberately misnamed. And then it happened. I didn't expect it. That's the funny part. I'd spent years hiding in plain sight, planning, building, winning contracts under a name that didn't trace back to them. But it turns out someone had noticed after all. A man in a charcoal suit, mid-50s, Boston accent, the kind of confidence that comes from surviving 3 rounds of corporate takeovers, stepped away from the appetizer table. He looked right at me. "Excuse me," he said, pointing subtly. "Aren't you the woman behind Stellara Events? I saw your name in Hospitality Quarterly last fall. CEO Spotlight, right?" I didn't answer, not because I was caught off guard, but because I wanted to know what would happen next. Sure enough, it didn't take 2 seconds for Vera to materialize at his side, smile practiced, tone sharp beneath the sugar. "Oh no," she said with a chuckle that was all surface. "That's her cousin. Looks like her, I know. Kayleen just helps us out now and then." The man blinked, confused. "Really? That's surprising." The feature was impressive. I remember thinking it was refreshing to see someone succeed without the usual last name perks. Vera waved him off. "Easy mistake. These things happen." I didn't correct her. I didn't nod either. I just looked at the man, and he looked back, realizing, I think, that something wasn't quite right, but not knowing how to push. The moment passed, like fog swallowing clarity. 15 minutes later, I was near the service entrance, adjusting a tray of dessert forks, when I spotted her. She wore a navy jumpsuit, minimalist but sleek, and her hair was pulled into a low twist. She moved with a deliberate calmness, scanning the room as if she were used to reading people before speaking. I knew her. Emily Kramer, senior features writer for Lux Life magazine. She'd interviewed me a year ago for a piece on silent founders, women building luxury brands without family backing or social media fanfare. Her eyes landed on me. I didn't speak, I just waited. She walked over, a glass of white in her hand, and tilted her head slightly. "You catered the Sapphire Awards, didn't you?" My throat tightened, not with fear, but with a readiness I hadn't felt in a long time. I parted my lips to answer, but Vera's voice shot across the room like a threadbare rope pulled too tight. "I'm sorry," she said, sliding between us. "You must be mistaking her for someone else. Our Kayleen is more of a family support role. She doesn't work full-time." Emily blinked, taken aback. "Really? That's odd. I remember a quote from her, something about leading with silence but executing with precision. It stuck with me." Vera's smile thinned. "I say things like that all the time. People get confused." Emily didn't argue. She didn't need to. Her eyes said it all. She looked at me, then at Vera, and tucked the moment away like a journalist filing mental notes for later. As Vera turned to guide her away with another wine refill, I stepped backward, back into the hallway. The air felt heavier now, but my posture didn't break. Dean was there, leaning against the doorway with a bourbon in hand. "I didn't know she'd say that," he muttered, eyes on the ground. I raised a hand. "No apologies tonight. You had years to speak up." He nodded once, lips pressed together like he wanted to say more. But he didn't. He never did. I kept walking. Back in the butler's hallway, I took out my phone. My thumbs moved quickly over the screen. Me. Draft press release. Embargo. Midnight. Subject. The unseen founder. Pull quotes from Lux Life and Forbes. Headline should sting. My assistant, Lily, replied instantly, "On it." For the first time in hours, I exhaled through a grin. They didn't just silence me. They reshaped me. Bent the narrative around my absence until my presence no longer fit. But facts have weight, and I was done waiting to be introduced. Back in the living room, people were whispering. The shift was happening, subtle but building. Is that her daughter or their chef? She looks too composed to be just staff. Funny, she looks familiar. Didn't I see her on a panel? Bryn caught wind of the murmurs. She walked toward a circle of guests, her tone casual, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. "She just likes attention when it's inconvenient," she said with a laugh that didn't quite land. Someone asked, "What does she do, actually?" Bryn's smile thinned. "She's figuring things out, trying a few hobbies." The irony was rich. From across the room, Emily caught my gaze again. She didn't say anything. She just walked over, hand slipped into her clutch, and pulled out a business card. She didn't offer it openly. She didn't speak. She just held it against her palm and brushed it into mine in a subtle pass, a nod, a knowing glance, and then she walked away. I didn't look at the card. I didn't need to. Instead, I turned toward the dining room again, just as the air changed. Victoria Chen had arrived. I saw her from the corner of my eye, entering with her assistant, quiet but unmistakably powerful. The conversations around her dropped a notch. Her presence didn't demand attention. It redirected it. Vera, of course, rushed to her. "Victoria," she said, her arms outstretched, voice 2 octaves sweeter. "We're so honored to have you. I've been hoping to connect you with my daughter Bryn. She's in PR, you know." I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to, because I picked up the nearest wine bottle, turned toward the dining room, and walked in, not as the maid, not as the invisible child, not as the old family helper. I walked in as a truth they hadn't planned for, as a contradiction they could no longer explain. There wasn't applause, but there was a shift, The kind of shift you can feel in the air when someone walks into a room and says nothing, yet every conversation slowly loses its steam until silence settles. Not because of authority, but because something unspoken just cracked open. That's what happened when I walked back into the dining room. The wine bottle I carried dangled by its neck, label turned inward. I didn't need to serve it. I wasn't anyone's help tonight. I wasn't on the seating chart, the program, or even the official family record. But I was here. I'd earned this place in the most brutal, elegant way a woman could, in silence. Vera spotted me first. Her head whipped toward the entrance like a reflex. She didn't say anything, not right away, but her lips thinned, her spine straightened, her fingers gripped her champagne flute so tightly I thought the glass might snap. Then came the gesture. 2 fingers. A flick upward. A sharp nod. "Kayleen?" she called across the room, her voice slicing through the hum of conversation like a cold knife. "Refill table 6, now." A few heads turned. Most of the room had been swirling wine, gossiping, performing. But Vera's voice always had a way of cutting through pretense like heat through ice. I stood still. Then slowly, calmly, I began walking. Not to table 6, but to her. I didn't rush. I didn't falter. My heels clicked against the hardwood like punctuation. Each step landed with quiet weight. When I reached her, I placed the bottle on a side table, intact, unopened, and met her gaze. "I'm not your staff, Vera." It came out quiet, even, but the room went still anyway. Gasps weren't audible, but they were there in the twitch of a brow, the pause of a hand reaching for a canapé, the nervous glance between guests who weren't sure if they were witnessing a scene or a secret finally escaping. Vera blinked. "Excuse me?" she said, but her voice faltered ever so slightly. I didn't raise mine. I didn't need to. "I'm not the help. Not tonight. Not anymore." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, from the left, I saw Bryn approaching with her signature damage control smile, always ready to sweep things up before they became too visible, too raw. She moved like she was walking toward a wounded animal. "She's just tired," Bryn said, loud enough for guests to hear. "You know how emotional she gets when—" I turned to her, not unkindly, but directly. "No, I'm not tired. I'm done. I'm done being useful only when it's convenient." That got murmurs, because everyone knew what that meant. Every woman in that room who had ever been the dependable one, in silence, understood the flavor of that sentence. Vera, now red in the face, turned her body to block me from the nearest table. Her voice lowered. She tried to hiss it just to me, but others still heard. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "You're ruining everything." "No," I replied, matching her volume but not her tone. "You ruined everything when you decided I was only valuable when invisible." I saw Dean flinch from his place near the fireplace. He didn't step forward. Bryn's jaw was tight now, her expression unreadable. A publicist's poker face. Vera's hands were shaking. She stepped in, closer to me than she had been in years. "Get out of my house," she said, low and vicious. I let that sit for a second, then answered evenly, "That was never really mine to begin with, was it?" And I turned. I didn't rush. I didn't stomp. I simply pivoted, reached for a clean champagne glass from the buffet table, and walked calmly toward the center of the room. I raised it, not for a toast, but as a declaration. Not one word, just presence. The room went silent again. Every head turned, every conversation ceased. That's when she saw me. Victoria Chen. She had entered quietly, but her presence didn't allow her to remain unnoticed for long. Her assistant hovered behind her, iPad in hand. She wasn't dressed like anyone else. Understated black. No jewelry except a single platinum band. Sharp eyes. Calculated warmth. Vera tried to move first. "Victoria!" she called out with too much cheer. "We're so honored to—" Victoria walked right past her. Didn't pause. Didn't look. She walked straight to me. I stood with the champagne glass in my hand, a half step from the edge of the fireplace rug. She stopped 2 feet in front of me. "It's Kayleen Vexley, isn't it?" My throat tightened, but I nodded once. Yes, she extended her hand. Finally we meet, she said. I've been waiting 2 years to shake your hand. Behind her, Vera's face cracked into a mix of confusion, horror, and denial. Dean stood frozen. Bryn looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. I took Victoria's hand, shook it firmly, and for the first time all night, I smiled. Not politely, not performatively, but fully, because I had just stepped into a space that none of them had prepared for. The version of me they'd built, the helper, the backup, the fallback option, was gone. And the version standing here? She didn't belong here. She had outgrown them. I didn't let go of her hand right away. Victoria Chen's grip was firm, confident, but not overbearing. It was the kind of handshake that came from years of making decisions that stuck, of signing deals that changed trajectories. She smiled at me, and it wasn't the polite sort of smile you toss at a stranger. It was the smile of recognition, respect. You built Stellara from scratch, she said loud enough for those nearby to hear. I've followed your work for years. I felt Vera freeze beside me, her body stiff as if someone had poured cement into her spine. Her wine glass tilted ever so slightly, and I swear I saw the liquid inside ripple. Yes, I replied, steady. I did. That was all. Just those 3 words. But in that moment, it felt like I had just signed my name in bold across every wall in that room. Gasps weren't audible, but heads turned. Conversations that had buzzed moments before died in place. Guests began subtly shifting in their chairs, leaning in to hear better without being obvious. Someone dropped a fork. No one picked it up. Victoria turned to the rest of the room, her posture relaxed, her voice carrying like she owned the air around us. This woman catered our last international retreat, she said, gesturing to me. 500 guests. Flawless execution. And I had no idea she was part of this family. The ripple moved through the room like a wave, slow but deliberate. Wait, she's the one? Someone whispered near the fireplace. I thought she was the sous chef, another voice murmured. I didn't look at Vera, but I could feel her unraveling. Her silence spoke volumes. She wasn't used to being outside the narrative. She didn't know how to watch a story unfold without holding the pen. Then came the inevitable. Well, Vera finally said, laughter too bright, too brittle. We always said Kylene had potential. She's just been finding herself. The phrase hit me like a slap, but it wasn't new. It was one of her favorites, usually deployed when trying to explain away my absence from holiday newsletters or social media photos. Finding herself was code for not successful enough to brag about. Victoria didn't blink. No, she said calmly, her voice clear and unhurried. She didn't find herself. She built herself, without your permission. The room went still again, and this time, it wasn't out of awkwardness. It was out of revelation. Bryn, standing nearby, looked down at her feet. Her perfectly coordinated stilettos suddenly felt too loud for the polished hardwood floor. She didn't speak. Across the room, Dean's gaze met mine. It lingered for a breath longer than I expected. There was something new in it, still quiet, still weighed down by years of silence, but this time, there was something else too. Pride. From the corner, near the back row of armchairs, I saw Evelyn, my grandmother. She didn't say a word, just gave the faintest nod. That was enough. That was everything. Victoria reached for a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and raised it slightly. To Kylene, she said, her eyes still on me. The kind of leader we need more of. Quiet power, real substance. For a moment, no one moved. Then someone clapped, then another, and another. The applause grew, not thunderous, but solid, grounded. It wasn't performative, it was real. The kind that makes your chest tighten, not because it's loud, but because it finally feels earned. Vera set her glass down. Didn't drink, didn't smile, just pressed her fingers into the table like she was trying to ground herself. I didn't linger in the center of the room. I didn't need to bask. The truth was already doing the work for me. I nodded to Victoria, then turned and walked toward the patio. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit my skin like a reminder that I was still here, still real. I leaned against the stone column and exhaled, watching my breath cloud in front of me. The door opened behind me. A guest I didn't know stepped out, wrapped in a cashmere shawl. She hesitated before speaking. "Why didn't you ever tell them?" she asked gently. I turned toward her, a soft smile forming before the words even reached my lips. They never asked. And that was the truth. Not once. Not even out of curiosity. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out, the screen glowing with a fresh notification. LinkedIn. "You've been tagged in a post by Victoria Chen." I tapped it open. "Proud to announce our partnership with the brilliant Kayleen Vexley, founder of Stellara Events. Her work defines excellence." There was a photo, me and Victoria shaking hands. Someone had already uploaded it. The caption was short, but it was already gathering attention, likes, comments, messages, recognition. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then slipped the phone back into my bag. Inside, I could hear the party shifting. Conversations resumed, but they sounded different now, more deliberate, less filtered. Bryn wouldn't be able to rewrite this. Vera wouldn't be able to pretend it never happened. Dean might finally say something next time. And Evelyn? She'd remember. She always did. I didn't need revenge. I didn't want an apology. I wanted air. And now, finally, I could breathe. I left the party that night with wind in my hair and silence in my lungs. The kind of silence that doesn't scream or crumble. It stands. Heavy, knowing. By the time I got back to my apartment, the city had already shifted back into its usual rhythm. Horns, lights, life. But I wasn't the same. I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't even take my shoes off right away. Instead, I walked to the window, pulled open the curtains, and stared at the skyline as notifications flooded my phone like a tidal wave, waiting for permission to crash, one after another. LinkedIn, Twitter, texts, emails. I finally sat down and unlocked my screen. 342 missed messages, 51 tags, 3 media requests, and at the top, Victoria's post. "Honored to partner with Kayleen Vexley, CEO of Stellara. Excellence, authenticity, and grace in one remarkable leader." I read it 3 times. Slowly, carefully. Not because I didn't believe it, but because it had taken 15 years for someone to say it out loud, without redirection, correction, or quiet edits behind my back. The comments were pouring in. Wait, isn't that the daughter her mother introduced as the Maid? She ran the Sapphire Gala? She was incredible. How did no one know? That question. That one stuck. Because the answer wasn't complicated. They didn't ask. Mid-morning, Bryn texted me, "Mom won't stop crying. The club's board called. It's a mess." I didn't reply. An hour later, Dean left a voicemail. His voice was hoarse, quieter than I remembered. "I'm proud of you," he said, "and I'm sorry I wasn't earlier." There was a pause. I should have said something a long time ago. He hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, then turned it over, screen facing the couch. Later that afternoon, I opened a blank invitation design and typed 9 words. This time, I serve no one. But you're welcome to witness. There was no menu, no schedule, no hashtags, just a place, a time, and the option to show up. That night, December 26th, the rooftop at Stellara's Manhattan venue bloomed in black and white. No excess, no flash, just soft lighting, curated jazz, champagne flutes catching reflections of a city that had once made me feel small, now shining beneath my feet. My team, my people, moved through the room with practiced grace. They didn't wear uniforms. They wore confidence, pride, ownership. I didn't enter with a tray or a clipboard. I entered in a tailored black suit, head held high, hair back, eyes forward. Some guests looked up as I passed. A few nodded. Others whispered, "She's the one from the LinkedIn post. She's the one who built it herself." I didn't stop walking. I didn't need to explain anything. Because for once, the room wasn't waiting for me to shrink into service. It was waiting for me to stand in presence. And I did. At 7:42 p.m., I walked to the mic, Not a stage, just a small platform near the edge of the room, city lights stretching behind me like witnesses. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't ask for silence. They gave it freely. 2 nights ago, I said, my voice calm. I was asked to serve, but not sit. A few people shifted. Not uncomfortably, just aware. I continued. Tonight, I don't serve. I stand, and I remember. I let the pause land, let the weight of it settle. I won't name names, that's not the point. This isn't a call-out. I looked around. At faces I knew, faces I didn't, faces that were learning me in real time. This is a reclamation, I said, of identity, of legacy, of space. And then I smiled. Sometimes, I said softly, the best dish is truth, served cold, with dignity. I stepped back. For a moment, there was only stillness. Then, slowly, it built, clapping, rising, not forced. Victoria stood first, clapped once, twice. Then the room followed. There weren't roars. There was reverence, power in restraint, grace as armor. From the far end, near the back corner, I spotted Bryn. She wasn't dressed for the spotlight tonight. Her shoulders hunched slightly, makeup softer, hair undone. She didn't clap right away, but she didn't leave either, until she did. Silently. She walked toward the elevator, alone. A few minutes later, Dean arrived. He didn't come to the mic. He didn't try to hug me. He just stood off to the side, hands in his coat pockets, watching. When I made eye contact, he nodded. Not a performance, just truth. The party shifted after that. People talked more quietly, asked different kinds of questions. Not what do you do, or how big is your team, but what drives you? How did you keep going when no one clapped? Toward the end of the evening, I walked past the wine table and paused to sip from a glass someone had left half full. A woman I didn't recognize turned to me, cautious but warm. You probably don't remember me, she said. I came to your mom's party. I was one of the guests. I raised an eyebrow, curious. She continued. I didn't say anything then, but I saw it, all of it, and I'm here now because I want to work with you. I smiled softly, letting the moment stretch. I remember everything, I said, and I did. After the rooftop event, I didn't feel triumphant. Not in the way movies sell it, with music swelling, applause echoing, closure arriving in one perfect scene. Instead, the following morning greeted me with an eerie stillness, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, but earned. I stood in my kitchen, tea steaming in my favorite mug, wrapped in an old knit sweater that smelled like lavender and old paper. The city was still moving out there, always rushing, always talking. But in my little apartment, it was quiet, purposeful. I didn't check my phone right away, not even when the first buzz came through, or the second. It wasn't until I noticed the bouquet resting by the door, white tulips wrapped in navy ribbon, that I finally walked over and picked up my phone from the counter. A simple note was tucked beneath the flowers. To the boss who taught us silence can roar. No name, just my team, my people. I finally opened my notifications. LinkedIn was still buzzing. Victoria's post had gone viral overnight. The comments section had become a live archive of praise, questions, shock, and unsolicited personal stories from women who'd been overlooked, overshadowed, and rewritten. And for once, none of them were alone in that story. I scrolled slowly, not to soak in the praise, but to witness what the truth had made possible. The sound of my phone ringing snapped me out of the scroll. The screen lit up with a number I hadn't seen in years, but recognized instantly. I answered on instinct. Hello? Kylene. The voice cracked, gentle but aged, like the texture of worn linen. Grandma? Evelyn didn't say anything for a moment, just breathed through the phone. I watched the whole thing, she finally said. The rooftop, the photo with Victoria, your words. I closed my eyes, leaning against the window. You were never invisible to me, she said softly. I just didn't know how to fight for you in their house. That was the thing about Evelyn. She never rushed her words. She didn't hide behind false warmth or empty reassurances. She just told the truth in a way that didn't sting. But now, she continued, you fight for you, and I think that's enough. My throat tightened. Thanks, Grandma. You don't owe them anything, Kayleen. Not your silence, not your patience, not your seat at the table. A pause. But if you ever do decide to talk to them again, make sure you bring your name with you, not theirs. We hung up, not with a goodbye, but with a kind of peace. A voicemail arrived 5 minutes later. Dean. I played it on speaker as I folded laundry, half expecting the usual hesitation, but this one started immediately. I was weak, he said. No build-up, no detour. I let your mother create a version of you that wasn't real, and I let it stand, for too long. I saw you building something, I did, but I didn't understand it, or maybe I was afraid it meant you didn't need us anymore. A sigh, rustling in the background. You turned out better than any of us deserved. And I hope someday I get to earn back the right to say I'm proud of you, to your face. I saved the message, didn't replay it, didn't delete it. Later that afternoon, a single email landed in my inbox, short, from Bryn. Subject, if you ever want to talk. Message, not as sisters, but as women. I'm here. I stared at the screen. Didn't answer, but I didn't trash it either. Some doors don't need slamming shut. They just stay closed because you stop knocking. That evening, as I tidied my desk, I noticed the framed invite for my upcoming speaking engagement at Cornell. Keynote: Women in Business Conference. Title: How to Build an Empire Without Permission. I opened the draft of my talk. Reread the closing line. Some scars become roots. That's how you grow stronger. I left it unchanged. Online, I caught a headline from the New Canaan Herald: Vera Harlow removed from chair role amid public backlash. Another post from a charity board: We are re-evaluating our affiliations and seeking voices that reflect real community values. No statements from Vera, no calls, just the quiet withdrawal of a name that used to own the room. The absence said more than any apology ever could. And strangely, I didn't need one anymore. I didn't need a reconciliation arc or a redemption scene. I just needed space. Not to fix things, but to move forward without them. By the time night rolled in, the city outside was a blur of headlights and high-rise windows glowing like tiny beacons. I sat at my own dining table, just 2 seats set. The second wasn't for Vera, or Bryn, or Dean, it was for whoever came next. When the doorbell rang, I knew exactly who it would be. I opened the door to find a woman in her early 20s, nervously adjusting the strap on her shoulder bag. "Hi," she said, slightly out of breath. "I'm Ava. I heard what you did. I'd like to intern, if you're open to that." She looked unsure, like maybe she'd come too late, or too early. I stepped aside and nodded. "Come in," I said. "I don't cook anymore, but I still build rooms for people who were once pushed out." She smiled and stepped inside. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones most determined to keep us small, not because we lack value, but because our light challenges the version of reality they've built. So here's a question for you. Have you ever had to earn respect from your own family, not with arguments, but with quiet success? If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. I read every one, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories about rising above, setting boundaries, and taking back your power.